Morning.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. The sound is good. I'm going to let you go, and we're going to get right to Reverend Thurston. Okay? Be careful driving in to the city, my home, New York City. Oh, well, you know how you feel about Atlanta.
6 minutes.
Oh yeah.
And I love Chicago. Don't get me wrong; it is home. But
Oh, I get it.
but
I get it.
you know what? Nicole went with me. She met me in New York when I did the reading for that play, for the musical,
Okay.
and we went out
Yeah.
afterwards. And she said, New York really is your home, isn't it? I said, oh yeah. I said, I have a whole life here. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
because Chicago can get a little close.
I get it.
I know you do.
Get that space to stretch out.
It can get a little close. It can get a little close. But we're up on Facebook, and everybody's coming up. And oh, I can't wait. How you doing, Paula? Birthday girl from last week. Let me see. Hiya. And good morning, Yolanda and Barbara Jean. Hey. And Shirley Carter and Carol and Shirley from Philadelphia. Of course, Daryl, praise the Lord, coming from Columbus. How you doing, sweetie? Everybody, please go to my new YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show. Please like and subscribe. You can come back to Facebook if you like, but I was told that I need to start moving everybody over to YouTube. You know what? Would you like to weigh in at 6:30 on the Meghan Markle interview?
That $1,400 check many
Reverend?
Americans will get from President
You talking
Biden's
to me?
COVID.
I
Oh
did
yeah.
not get Santita.
But you know what? I think I think there's a broader issue here.
Signature. The AP's Julie
Because
Walker.
Barbados
Billions for vaccines,
came out of the
$1,400
Commonwealth
stimulus checks for many
Correct.
Americans. Money to
in
feed the
September,
hungry,
right?
open schools,
And
help small
94%
businesses
of the
and
Commonwealth
struggling
countries,
restaurants,
British
among
Commonwealth
other
countries,
things.
are
I'm Julie Walker.
Indian and
No
African.
reaction from Buckingham Palace yet to Prince
Uh-huh.
Harry and Meghan Markle's bombshell
Yeah.
interview
And
with
so they're
Oprah.
saying that
Meghan
this
says she faced
interview
racism. Wanted to
altering
kill herself.
Black
Harry said he
Britain's
was trapped in the royal system.
relationship
The
with,
British are
to the
reacting to the
monarchy.
interview.
I think it's a shame that they did it.
And I just think it's
Gotcha.
just, I think it's just, but almost half of Britain, of the British people felt that the royal family was shamed, and that was not right. So
The body of a New
because they
Jersey
have a
man who
different
disappeared
approach.
during last month's
They have a different
massive
relationship
snowstorm
to
has been
monarchy
found
than we do.
buried
As
in
Americans,
snow
we're like, okay,
outside
that's
his
Correct.
nice,
parents'
but
home.
no.
Andrew Fraioli was 40
And so I just
years
think,
old.
Right.
I think it's just,
This
it
is
speaks
AP
to
News.
where the world is moving, because I think that she gave the
New York's
monarchy
Attorney General
more
has named a team that
relevance,
will investigate
because
Governor
for her
Andrew
to get off the
Cuomo.
plane
Okay.
in
AP correspondent Mike
Barbados
Rossi
then,
reports.
and Jamaica, and India, and these other countries,
Yeah.
that they needed her more than she needed them. Well, shall I
I
say,
agree.
they needed her. And and they got someone who, I mean, look, she was at Northwestern. She was not in a black sorority, right? I mean, her whole
Mm-hmm.
her orientation has been very, very white. But she is very close to her mom and all of that, and I can appreciate that. But it's I just, if you want to weigh in, I just think it's interesting. I think it speaks to
Jury selection
just
now
the fact that
expected to
people
begin
were
today, a day later
shocked.
than
Oh,
scheduled, in the
I
trial
can't
of a
believe
former
what she's saying. I'm
Minneapolis
like,
police officer
we talk
charged in
about
George Floyd's death.
brown
Prosecutors
sticking
are trying to add
around,
a charge
yellow
against
mellow,
him.
white
I'm
is all right
Nicole Lake,
today.
Yeah.
AP
Come on, I'm
News.
like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Oprah,
Yeah.
they said that to you, the British royal family? Of course they did. And interestingly, when you're in interracial relationships, if you might have children,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes the white family wants to know, and the black family too, what's this child going to look like? Sadly,
That's right.
the black
That is
families
important.
are hoping the child's going to be lighter, and so is the white family. Yes, I said it, y'all. I said it because it's the truth. We got problems.
Hey, Santita, and if it's a little girl, is that hair gonna be combable?
Oh, not combable, with a fine tooth comb. Oh, come on, man, because it's all combable. They just want it, I mean, because we're still talking about good hair and whatnot. I mean, because for me,
Sure.
the
Yeah.
conversation really is about colorism, racism. It's not just,
Yeah.
so if you want
Yeah.
to weigh
It's a
in,
deeper issue. Yeah.
because this is who you're talking
Okay.
to.
Sure thing.
And I thought about it. I said, you know what? Let me ask Stephen if he wants to do that. Because it's a mirror moment, Stephen.
This is
That is true. No problem.
Listen in
No
Chicago.
problem.
Aren't you having a Facebook tonight?
Stream us live on WCPT
I am doing, yes, I'm doing a session tonight
Okay,
on Living on Autopilot.
let's put that out there. But you should do something
Okay.
on
Are you the
this
parent
too.
of a 2 to 7-year-old? Listen closely for an
Cool.
exciting
I
free
can put
radio
them together.
offer.
Oh
By now,
my
you've
God!
probably heard of ABC
I'm
Mouse,
so
the
I know
Parents'
you
Choice
can.
Award-winning online learning
I
program
promise
that's
you
actively
should.
changing the lives of early learners everywhere.
Absolutely, you
ABC
should.
Mouse is like
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
one-on-one teacher.
Yeah, I'll be
It
happy to.
has helped her
'Cause it's-
so much.
Right now, we're offering a
It's
special
a
radio
lot.
promo to try it free for a month.
You know.
But you have to go
Yes,
to
ma'am.
abcmouse.com/radio
It's
to
a
claim
lot.
your free month. That's
Oh,
abcmouse.com/radio.
Sponsored by
So,
Age of Learning.
but we're gonna go right
The
to.
Center of Concern provides housing and support
They got
services
so
for
much
older
going. There's
adults,
so much going
people with
on. But I mean,
disabilities, and
it's
individuals
just
and families at
fascinating
risk
to.
of homelessness.
Uh,
During the
Dylan,
pandemic,
can you bring
the
this
center
down
has
just a little
modified
bit in the
programs to
back?
keep residents safe while providing critical community services. Follow CDC guidelines, protect yourself and others. Visit
Hello, Dylan.
centerofconcern.org/COVID for resources and
Dylan?
information. That's centerofconcern.org/COVID.
Okay,
About
Dylan.
36.
The Center of Concern provides housing
Okay,
and
can you
support
bring
services
the
for older
the
adults,
radio feed
people
down
with
just a bit?
disabilities, and individuals and
That-
families at
Okay,
risk of
perfect.
homelessness.
Thank you,
During the pandemic,
Reverend
the center has
Thurston.
modified programs to keep residents
Yes, ma'am.
safe while
Okay, I
providing
just want to make sure
critical
you're still
community
up. Okay,
services.
Dylan.
Follow
The levels
CDC
on
guidelines,
the level on
protect
Reverend
yourself
Thurston
and
is
others.
great. Okay.
Visit centerofconcern.org.
Okay, good.
COVID.
It's about the same. In 20 seconds.
Yeah, it's much better.
.org/COVID.
Think Theory Radio.
Manipulating the masses is more utilizing propaganda, gaining a wide quadrant of the public, where crowd manipulation is more focused.
But I
like the
watched it because I
divisionary
knew that this would be
tactics
part of the
these political
conversation this week.
parties. They utilize certain talking
Understood,
points
yeah.
and
Boy,
phrases to
has it
target
been.
specific groups.
And
Has
you know,
it? Yeah, I've seen it in my timeline.
oh yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
I
yeah.
have
So when
seen a lot.
something like this happens, just
Yeah.
heads up.
With Amy and Purdue. Saturdays
Tune
at
in,
6
even though I know
p.m.
people
on
like us
WCPT
do not care.
820. WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk.
Don't.
Where facts
Okay, we're coming up.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson. This is the Santita Jackson Show from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I am Santita. It's a joy to be with you today. Please call or text me. Call or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text, and I want you to meet my morning stars over here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook and my new YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show channel. So everybody, Paula, the birthday girl from last week, Carol, Shirley from Philadelphia, Barbara Jean, Michael and Daryl, everybody, please go over there and like and subscribe. You can come back to Facebook, but like and subscribe because I really need to build those numbers up and I need your help. I can't do it without you. And all the people in radio land, please do that when you can. It's a joy to be with you today. Of course, we are going to be talking about Meghan Markle and Harry, Prince Harry. Wow. This is the gift that keeps on giving. There's so much to unpack with this interview. And I want to get your thoughts about that. We talked about it last night on Let's Talk About It with Santita Jackson and Friends. And so many of you wanted to weigh in today. So I want to hear from you. We're going to talk about that at the bottom of the hour. We're going to get some COVID Q&A in from Dr. Deborah Furholden as the CDC guidelines are changing for those who are fully vaccinated. It seems like those who are fully vaccinated are getting more social space. They're able to do more socially in the United States and around the world. What is the impact of that? And what is it that you can do if you're fully vaccinated? And what does full vaccination mean? What does it mean? So we will have John Nichols, of course. It's Tuesday. Can't wait to talk to him about the 8 Democrats. Well, the 7 Democrats and the 1 independent who voted to remove the $15 an hour minimum wage increase out of the COVID-19 relief bill. Mm. And there are some people who are Trumpers, who are young, who are on the move in the party. Who are they? And what do they stand for? He's got a lot to share with us today. So let's get to some of these headlines. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 63 degrees above zero. Yes, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 65 degrees, partly cloudy. Well, the stocks was a bit of a mixed bag yesterday. The Dow closed up 306 points. The Nasdaq closed down 310 points, and the S&P 500 closed up 20 points, everybody. Fully vaccinated Americans can meet in groups indoors without masks or distancing, but must cover their faces in public. That is according to the new guidelines released yesterday by the CDC. Going to be talking with Dr. Deborah Verholden about that. There's new information coming out of Europe that's saying that Meghan Markle's revelations have destroyed Black Britain's trust in the monarchy. That is from foreign policy. What will be the lasting impact? We're going to talk about that shortly. Indeed, remember that Barbados, a member of the Commonwealth, said that it was time to cast off the shackles of colonialism, and they left the Commonwealth, and they said they hoped to inspire other countries to do the same. Remember, 94% of the Commonwealth countries are Black and Indian, South Asian, everybody. The jury selection is moving forward in the murder trial of Derek Chauvin. He's a gentleman, the police officer at the time, who knelt on the neck of George Floyd, killing him. The judge overseeing the trial of the former Minneapolis police officer charged in George Floyd's death, and of course we are awaiting yet another murder charge for him, said he would move forward with jury selection on Tuesday despite an ongoing dispute over the possible reinstatement of a third-degree murder trial that threatens to delay the case. In the meantime, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, who fought to save her life, well, Kenneth Walker, the prosecutors dismissed an attempted murder of a police officer charge against him permanently. Wow. So God bless him. A relief bill in this COVID-19 relief bill. This is the most significant legislation for Black farmers since the Civil Rights Act, according to experts. There's a lot in this bill that is quite good, but of the $10.4 billion in this American Rescue Plan that will support agriculture, approximately half will go to disadvantaged farmers, according to estimates from the Farm Bureau. And about a quarter of disadvantaged farmers are Black. Remember, Blacks were brought to the United States in slavery to be the agriculturalists. And many, many Black farmers have been pushed out of farming because they've been chased out of the South by racists, and they've not been able to get access to the farm subsidies. Maybe this will change this. And for all of our brothers and sisters down in the South, in Brazil, something really exciting has happened. Former Brazilian President Lula da Silva is going to challenge President Bolsonaro in 2022. This is big, everybody. They put this union president, this union leader, probably the most populist leader in Brazil, which is a country outside of Africa, everybody. More Blacks were sent to Brazil during the slave trade than were sent to the United States. That's right. Well, he's the most popular figure, very popular with Black Brazilians, and he was put in prison. Many people feel falsely imprisoned in the hopes that they would keep him out of politics. That has not worked. And so we will see what this champion of the disadvantaged in Brazil, what's going to happen. Wow. This hospital-owning Frist family made a killing, if you will, during the pandemic. Their wealth soared, everybody, by $8.1 billion. Wow. Did you know that there's new data that shows that the human family has degraded or destroyed two-thirds of the world's rainforest? New data from a Norwegian nonprofit, the Rainforest Foundation. Norway analysis found that human activities, including logging and land use changes, often for farming, have destroyed 34% of old-growth tropical rainforests and degraded 30% worldwide. Some people are saying that even this coronavirus can be blamed on deforestation and environmental degradation. Let us go to Reverend Stephen Thurston, the teaching pastor of the House of Hope. Salem Baptist Church. The author of the book Mirror Moments, he's going to stay with us today as we unpack all of the race and class issues around the Meghan Markle, Prince Harry revelations. But give us some good news today. So much is going on, Pastor.
Yes, ma'am. So much, always. Listen, Santita, when I consider and even engage in consultation with members of the community and the church, we encounter problems. People are always bringing me as pastor their problems. And I've noticed something in those conversations that helps them navigate the nuances of those situations, that it can be difficult dealing with problems without people becoming upset, angry, taking things personally, or misunderstandings developing. Because as we navigate and negotiate through issues, it can be easy to forget that we're not dealing with an abstract representative of a counterposition to ours, but rather we're dealing with another human being on the other side who has emotions, a set of values, viewpoints, and a background that has shaped their lens and their worldview. So it's important that we're ever mindful when dealing with other human beings that just like us, they get depressed, angry, hostile, fearful, offended, and frustrated, which then impacts our engagement with them. So as we're tackling the issues at hand, and there's so many, as you just read in your opening remarks, remember that egos are at play, that each person has their individual vantage point, and as a result, we become prone to confusing our perception with reality. Ultimately, what I'm saying is that people are not problems. They're two different things. And we need to remember that as we're engaging and even have different perspectives on particular issues. Because misunderstandings produce reactions, which will then lead to counter reactions, which lead to further counter reactions, and the vicious cycle will continue. So it's important that we remember that developing working relationships with people where trust, understanding, and respect are built over time, that will help us in dealing with future problems in a more efficient, healthier, and respectful manner. So as we work through the problems at hand, I want us today to keep in mind that we have two interests at play, the problem and the person or the people. And with the problem, you're seeking to reach an agreement that satisfies both sides. With the person or the people, your aim should be to maintain working relationships, do nothing that will hinder further interactions. I want us to stop making a mistake of treating people and problems as one. And somebody on the other side is already thinking about a person and a problem right now.
Yes.
And they're saying in their mind, how, Stephen? How? Especially when I well know that the person is the cause of the problems that we're experiencing. Listen, it starts with a mind shift. Be sure to base your relationships with the person, with the people, on accurate perceptions, on clear communication, on appropriate emotions, and forward-looking outcomes. Listen, conflict lies not in objective reality, but in people's heads. And differences exist because they exist in each person's thinking. It's the reality that each person sees that often contributes to the problems that we face. So quickly, I'll give us 5 steps to help us, to deliver us, to develop a more accurate perception as we separate people from the problems we encounter. So the first thing I want us to do, this is our homework assignment, is to switch sides, because people tend to see what they want to see. Even when details and facts are laid out, people will pick out and focus on that which substantiates their perceptions and discard the rest. I think we'll see this play out in the whole Meghan Markle conversation that was shared the other day, Prince Harry, all of that. People don't hear what they want to hear. The ability to see a situation as the other sees it is a critical skill that we should all develop. And here's the thing. We could be wrong in our perception, in our vantage point, in our lens. And so we've got to try on other people's views, just to try to see it from their side of the fence and understand that understanding their point of view is not the same as agreeing with it. The second thing we ought to do is to boycott blame. Now, I get it. This isn't easy to do when you feel that the other person on the other side is responsible. And even if it's justified, it's counterproductive. because the other side, the other person, is going to become defensive and strike back with an attack. Assessing blame firmly just entangles the people and the person with the problem. Number 3, we should share stories. And when we share our stories from our lens, our perspective, we want to make them explicit and begin a dialogue with one another. And this may provide some understanding that each side actually needs. Number 4, act inconsistent. I know I just lost somebody right there, but I want you to act inconsistent, because the best way to change one's perception of you is to send a message different from what's expected. I remember at Morehouse College, I allowed one of my Spelman sisters to borrow my car one afternoon, Santita. And when she brought it back, there was a big dent in the front of the car that wasn't there when I gave it to her. And I could look in her eyes and see fear in her eyes. She was literally about to tremble. And so what I decided to do, I took the car, sent her back over to her dormitory. I went to the mall and bought her some gifts and brought them back to her dorm. It totally shocked and surprised her, and it leveled the playing field in a sense for us to have an honest dialogue about what happened, and then for me to remind her, I've got insurance. It'll be taken care of. I'm not going to come after you. Things are going to be well. 5, and finally, you want to build some buy-in. If they aren't involved in the process, they probably won't like the product. And so we should try to work things out in the present moment instead of working things out later on down the road. And in working things out, we should get the input, the buy-in, the lens, the perspective from the person from the other side, because agreement ultimately becomes much easier if both parties feel ownership of the ideas and the process at hand. We want to get the other side involved early and give them credit generously. I hope that we leave today understanding that people aren't problems, that we don't continue to confuse the two, and I think that will leave us in a healthier space of engagement and relationship, one with the other.
Amen to that. The teaching pastor of the Salem Baptist Church, the House of Hope, the author of Mirror Moments. That's why he's here every Tuesday. And stay right there. We've got Dr. Deborah Holden, world-renowned epidemiologist, founding academician, that's right, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. So excited to have you here with us always. What do you want to talk to us about as we're looking at people, they're getting vaccinated and the CDC is changing the guidelines? It's interesting. A lot of people are very excited. Well, what do you want us to look at today?
Oh, you mean changing the guidelines on what to do post-vaccination?
Yeah, I mean, that you can actually go into someone's home, unmasked, but if other people have been vaccinated, you can be around them. You don't have to be masked, but of course you need to be masked in public. It just seems every day things are changing. But what do you want us to focus on today?
Well, so the CDC, and I'll just give my honest opinion, has said and done things that I think, and I'll just be Deborah for a minute. They do the least and then they do the most. And what I'm really looking for is them to just do the job. Okay? So there was a time period when they were doing the least. They weren't giving enough. Wasn't good information. The information was coming down as quick as it could go up. And then they would do the most. Telling people if you've had any exposure, you got to go into quarantine for 14 days. I always tell people that is completely ridiculous and that is overkill. And then they were insistent, you can't test your way out of quarantine. I said, that doesn't make absolutely no sense whatsoever. Because you are not going to walk around an asymptomatic carrier for 14 days and test negative that whole time. Like, it's just not going to happen. So even now with some of the recommendations that they're giving around what to do after you get vaccinated, I just don't think they're being responsible for what's the real knowledge that you need to give people so people can make good decisions for themselves. So let's take a look real quick at what the vaccine provides you. The vaccine will significantly reduce the chances that if you are exposed, that you will spread the virus to give it to somebody else. Okay? So it does greatly reduce that. It also significantly reduces the likelihood that if you're exposed to the virus, that virus will replicate and you will become sick. So if it decreases the likelihood of you spreading it to others, but it doesn't take it to zero, and it greatly decreases the likelihood that you'll get sick from the disease, have to be hospitalized and prevent death. It's got a lot of real positive benefits for you, right? So you're pretty good if you were to be exposed. Where the protocols still come into play is it's now about preventing you from potentially infecting others, right? Because you'll be fine. You got the vaccine, but others won't be fine. So then you're still asked to wear your mask. You're still asked to wash your hands. You're still asked to watch your distance and your density and the duration that you're at places, because it's about preventing you, the vaccinated person, from becoming a vector, right? So then if you've got a bunch of people that are vaccinated, what does that mean? Well, that means you're at already reduced risk for transmitting it to somebody else. And then the people you're around are at super low risk from becoming sick, even if they were exposed. So that's the logic behind it. And it was kind of cool because when I got my vaccine and then my daughter recovered from COVID, I gave her a big hug and a big fat wet one right on the cheek, because we hadn't done that in a long time. And we were both laughing and giggling about how we've got antibodies, active antibodies right now. So I just think it's so much more important that people have the information, that they understand how things work, and so that they can make good decisions for themselves. Because it will make your eyeballs cross trying to keep up with all these real-time recommendations that are changing constantly, that don't seemingly have a lot of logic or reasoning behind them. But there is a logic and a reasoning, and it is that you're less likely to get infected, and the people that you would be around are also less likely to get infected or become sick, so people can relax a little bit. But it doesn't change what you do out in the world.
Well, I mean, that's important to note because, as you have explained the vaccines to us, you have been very, very you've really just given us a lot of caution. You said, look, this is not going to stop you from getting COVID-19, the coronavirus, which gives you COVID-19, or nor will it stop you from spreading it, but it mitigates it.
Yeah.
And I think that is so important for us to know, particularly as they are, because one got the impression, I got about a minute before we go. One could walk away with the impression, having heard this, that, okay, if you've been vaccinated, now you can, when you are with other vaccinated people, you don't need to wear a mask. You don't really need to exercise precautions. And you're saying, no, that's not quite it. I got 1 minute, literally.
Not all. That's not all the way like the full story. But if you are around, if everybody that you're with is vaccinated, you do have a large degree of protection in the room, and that does afford you the opportunity to be together, and you can be together unmasked. Now, but again, what happens is the second you then get around people who are not, you got to have those protocols back in place.
Okay.
Because it doesn't mean that the people in the room might not be able to pass the virus to each other. It means they won't get sick from it.
Okay.
Right? That's what happens when you got a lot of vaccinated people. But let's say you get exposed in a room full of people who've been vaccinated, and then you go home to a household that has people in it that aren't vaccinated. You might actually bring the virus home. So it's a trade-off. Yeah, you get a little bit of benefit of being able to be more relaxed around others who are vaccinated. But then if you're overly relaxed, you run the risk of potentially exposing people that you come in contact with later who are not.
Hold that thought.
So, yeah.
More of the Santita Jackson Show, talking about Meghan and Harry in just a few minutes. Dr. Dr. Deb, Michelle Williams says that people are having burning masks parties. I mean, they're having mask burning parties. I mean, they are. That's why.
Mr. Riley and Mr. McKee is on.
Oh, okay.
People just over this whole everything. People just over COVID.
Look, I know I'm over it, but I'm
Me
over
too.
it. I'm over
Me
it.
too.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm so over it. I cannot even tell you how over it I am. I'm like, I'm done. I mean, DUN, in. I'm so done right now. I am like fried with COVID. I'm sick of this. Girl, I kissed my father on top of his head with his little feathers that he calls hair. I just kissed him when I saw him the other day because I hadn't seen him in like a month. He's been in rehab. They would only let one of us see him per week. So everybody had to take a turn, and my hours are so crazy, I couldn't go. I have never gone a week without seeing my father, even in college, okay? And I was away in college. Rochelle Riley and Dwight McKee.
Hello.
I saw my father I have always seen him. So in my life, I've never. I mean, and this is, and then you walk into your parents' home and you can't hug them and kiss them. I'm like, what?
I know.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, and my brother Jonathan just said, forget this. I was about to give him a fist bump. He said, he hugged me. He said, look, no, I'm done. And he said, now we're done with this. He said, now I'm your brother and you are going to hug me, kiss me. I got you.
Yeah.
So I got it. So I said, thank you. Well, I mean, he hugged me with his mask on. I said, just keep your mask raised. Hello. Well, but we are talking about Meghan and Harry. It's the whole world is talking about them. We had a robust discussion about this last night on Let's Talk About It with Santita Jackson and friends. And I said, I've got to get Rochelle Riley in on this discussion. She has a magnificent book, The Burden, African Americans and the Enduring Impact of Slavery. I think we could have inserted colonialism where slavery is, since slavery has been a colonial project. And right. And so, and when we get on the other side of the break, because Pastor Stephen Thurston from the Salem Baptist Church, this is the largest Black church in the state of Illinois, and his father was the president of the Progressive Baptist Convention. His grandfather was a contemporary of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's. He and my father are like brothers, and his father and my father are like brothers. He's like my father's son. And so a brilliant preacher, and of course Dwight McKee, who Reverend Thurston, brilliant sociologist. Brilliant sociologist. And this is Dr. Deborah Holden. She's up in Michigan with you, Rochelle Riley. She is helping to build the School of Public Health at Michigan State University. She's a world-renowned epidemiologist. And yes, I'm going to say it. Be quiet, Deborah. She got her PhD from Johnson at 24, full scholarship. Okay. All right. Our sister's on a roll, and we need to let people know. We need to let people know. Yeah, we need to let people know who she is. That's why I want you to bring her to Salem, to the House of Hope. Even if you Skype her in or Zoom her in, whatever it is, Stephen, because people need to know she exists, and she is fighting for vaccine equity, for health equity, all of these things. And she's someone who we need to know her. She's worthy of our attention. And if we don't we need to lift her up. I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to wait for these other outlets to lift our people up. That's crazy. Take care, do for yourself. And then you find that all these other people come running after you. When you are
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody, it's Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. I want you to call me or text me at WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Praying for you all up there as you are about to, we're about to see if George Floyd is going to get justice. Heard one of his relatives on television crying out for justice for George Floyd, for her brother. Indeed, she was crying out for justice for his daughter. Remember, he has a baby that he was taken from. Remember that, everybody. What about Meghan Markle and her husband Harry? Prince Harry and these revelations. Foreign Policy magazine, an esteemed international journal, the headline is Meghan's revelations have destroyed Black Britain's trust in the monarchy. What do you think about that, everybody? Call me, text me at 773-763 WCPT, 773-763-9278. I want to know, do you think that this interview will have a lasting impact? Or were you shocked by the revelations? Are you shocked by the fact that she said someone in the royal family pondered, how dark will the child be? What is this child going to look like? Now, I think it's time that we have an honest moment, because colorism is still with us and it's alive and well. So what does all of this mean? And why does this mean so much to so many people? Rochelle Riley, I met her years ago when she was a columnist with the Detroit Free Press, but she's gone on to do even greater things than that, being this brilliant columnist. And she has a book, I hope that you will get it, The Burden. It's like it was written for this time, African Americans and the Enduring Impact of Slavery, Colonialism. I'm going to put that in there, Rochelle Riley, because that's like what we're talking about today. And then, of course, brilliant sociologist Dwight McKee, Dr. D. Everybody loves him here on the Santita Jackson Show, National Action Network, Rainbow Push. He's been active in organizing for more than 50 years. A reverend, a pastor, Thurston, decided to stay with us. He said, I kind of want to get in on this because it's something that the thousands of people to whom he speaks every week, it's something that we're thinking about. Meghan Markle did say, I thought it was important for people of color to see someone who looked like them, in a power position. And Dr. Deb, I know you're still there, but you've got children, and this impacts us all. So let me start with you, Rochelle Riley. What do you think about the interview, about the revelations?
Well, first, let me say good morning. You know how wonderfully I feel about you, but I want to make sure to say hello to Dr. Deborah Holden, the C.S. Mott Endowed Professor of Public Health at Michigan State University. And I also want to thank all women across your Chicago, my Detroit, and across the country, and welcome them to You Are More Than Enough month, that we are going to make sure that we lift up each other as women. But now let me say this. I'm still surprised when we're surprised by these things. We're talking about a country that colonists, future colonists, left to escape and brought racism and ideas of slavery with them. So every time somebody is really surprised by somebody else talking about Black folks, I go, well, we tried to tell you. So I think that we've got two things going on. One is I don't think people really, really understood just what it meant to become a princess in the firm, in the institution. The things that I was reminded of that I just didn't remember was that when she got married, they took her passport and her ID, which means you can't even fly, you can't even run. And the second thing is Harry literally is a member of this firm, of this family. The love he has to have for this woman, first of all, to put up with the fact that the British tabloids were horrible about her race, about the fact that she was American, and he loved her anyway. And he had to choose between his family and her, and he chose her. But the fact that he felt trapped and had to get out of that trap and she saved him, there were so many different things that were stunning about this, but the two most stunning were the fact that she was ready to kill herself because of all of the things that were happening to her. And the fact that, yes, there's racism everywhere, always has been, always will be.
Well, Rochelle, I think one of the things, just very quickly, I guess I'm surprised that she's surprised. When you go into these enterprises, the president of the United States or the president of any country, they don't even have access to their charge cards.
That's right.
Because you go into a system, you lose a lot of freedoms. I only saw a portion of it when Reverend ran for president, right? I mean, you can't move the way you used to move. I mean, that's just, whenever you gain something. Reverend C.L. Franklin, I heard a wonderful sermon from him that my father was playing on Sunday. What you ask God to give you the mountain, well, you're going to pay a price to get there.
That's right.
And so
that's exactly right.
So that kind of comes with the territory.
She was very naive. She was very naive.
Well, but I think also her social circle is very white, and so I think there's some pieces that she missed. And this is not to well, it is a criticism, but it's a loving criticism, because if you're going to function in this world as a black person in particular, not just as a person of color, but black people are the most vilified people on earth. Let's just establish that. You got to have some backup and a good foundation in order to make it. And even then, it's
That's
going to be
right.
tough,
Some
right?
some people get the hard wake up call that they're black. They get these reminders that push them back that they're black or part black or live with the same racism that other people do. And you're right. She really did not have to experience this until she had to really experience it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why you wrote The Burden. African Americans
Yes,
and enduring, oh my gosh,
you're
impact of
carrying that
slavery,
burden whether you think so or not.
whether you think so or not. Dwight McKee, what say you?
Well, let me correct some of the mess in the conversation. Is most white people from England didn't escape religious persecution to come over here. They were sent here to set up a colonial system. The royal family was the major investors and the major guys to help set up that system. Is the first slaves came in 1619. They came into Jamestown, Virginia. James was the king at the time. Virginia was the Virgin Queen. They came into Baltimore, Maryland. Lord Baltimore owned the land. Maryland was Mary's land. She was the queen then. These were systems of slave enterprises that were set up for the purposes of exploiting somebody else's land. And so the myth of religious persecution is just not so. Is most people were sent here to colonize. We speak the Queen's English, not because God called us to or told us to. It's because that was the language imposed upon us by the people that kidnapped us from Africa. That was their language. It became our language because they were the colonizers, they were kidnappers, they were the slaveholders. And so to be surprised that racism exists in a system that is the product of racism really is a mystery to me.
Okay, well, why do you think people are so mystified, though, to your point, Dwight?
Walt Disney. Walt Disney. I think Walt Disney. I think the Grimm brothers. I think we see.
Amen.
I think we believe the hype. There's a difference between a fairy tale.
But wait, people kept saying, why can't we have a fairy tale? Why can't we have a fairy tale prince? And I saw people the day she got married at our regular Saturday morning forum at Operation Push at Rainbow Bush. People were wearing fascinators. Yes, Stephen. Yes, Pastor Thurston. Yes, Reverend. Look. Yes, Rochelle, they were. And my mother and I were like, huh? what, what am I missing here? I mean, because also it's just like, they're comparing her to Princess Diana or to Diana, Princess of Wales. And Diana, when asked if she wanted to dismantle the monarchy, she said, "Oh no, 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 no! My son's going to be the head of this. I just want them to be nicer." I said, She lost me there. Meghan Markle said the same thing. Well, no, no. I mean, because she wanted her son to have that title. I'm not mad at her because she married into it. But I guess as a Republican, that is an American who believe, we have a republic. I'm not a Republican, you guys. But as let me just say that, but as a Republican, small r, someone who does not endorse monarchy, I was like, well, should she have been pushed to suicide to have suicidal thoughts? Absolutely not. It's horrible. Look, one of the first parties she went to, one of the prince's relatives was wearing a blackamoor brooch. You remember that? Was like, oh my gosh, these folks are swinging for the fences. Pastor Thurston, what do you say to young people,
Um,
particularly young kids who were looking and saying, wow, I have a black princess?
don't believe the hype. Racism is the foundation of not only America, but globally. It's the foundation of how this world exists. It's always there. And as one of the young ladies mentioned a few minutes ago, we are going to be reminded of our color at some point in time. Doesn't matter your economic status, your national origin. If you got black in you, at some point in time, they're going to remind you that you're black. And so, as you stated, it's important that as a collective community across the world, we stay connected to one another because we're going to need one another when they remind us how black we are. Because it's going to take us to take care of us and support us and to carry us through, to help us refrain from that place of suicide when we're reminded that we're black.
Rochelle Riley, were you surprised that she felt pushed to suicide?
I'm not surprised by any person's mental capacity for what they can take. I think it was such a shame that the firm would risk anybody ever finding out that she was trying to seek help and they didn't give it. I was surprised that she was told no. In this instance, this is the kind of thing where I would have thought they would have said, we have some place for you, and they would have taken her very privately without anybody knowing to a hospital, because what would have happened had she decided to take some action? If she is saying that she could not be left alone and went to public functions with her husband so she would not be left alone, that's a state that is, quite frankly, I don't question when people say they have concerns about their mental health, but the idea that she could not get help and could not leave and get on a plane and come home because they had her passport and her ID, that was bothersome, and that was that lets you know to what extent the royal family is royal and is above any type of moral level where someone else would be.
Well, we just found out the Queen can actually actively changes laws to protect her wealth. That just came out a couple of weeks ago in The Guardian. I don't think we understand just how powerful, Dwight, this royal family is.
She's the largest owner in the world.
Say that one more time.
The Queen is the largest landowner in the world.
She owns Australia. She owns Canada. These are empires. These are people who conquered in the name of the Queen. That's whose flag they put on the land when they took it from the natives. It was the Queen's flag. These were flags, wasn't flags of countries. These were flags of families. This thing is 1,200 years old. They've been conquering a long time a lot of places. And so we really can't look at 2020 and try to come to some conclusions about what this family has done and who this family is. All of these royal families in Europe have been, over the last 600 and 700 years, have been the background of the war. World War I was really a war between families, the same family. Kaiser Wilhelm was the cousin of the Spencer family, who was a German family, by the way. It was never an English family. All of them were the grandchildren and children of Queen Victoria. The reason that a lot of the Europeans left Europe is because they couldn't own land in Europe. They were starving in Europe. All the potatoes in Ireland went to England first. Irish had to eat what was left. That's what created the potato famine. That's why they came over here. This thing is wide and deep, you all, and in levels that we probably would never understand. These people are worth trillions of dollars. Why? Because they stole the gold, they stole the land, they had other people work for them for free. And 1,200 years later, they're the richest people in the world and control and own a great deal of the world.
Oh, yes. 94% of the Commonwealth countries are Indian and African. In fact, she controls, I think, a third of the world's landmass. It is stunning when you see it. You know, Dr. Deborah Verholden, you have got 3 young adult children. You're about to be blessed to see another generation come forth. Our children see this differently. How have you, and is there a difference? Have your children discussed uh, this interview and how have you reacted to it?
I don't think, honestly, my kids saw the interview. We had a whole lot of family time over the past few days, but it's not hard to get the highlights from it or get a sense of what happened. The joke that our kids made is, people have this impression that England is so great, but anytime you're fleeing racism by coming to America, you got to be like, what are you leaving, right? And so, they're young folks. And they, like many of us, have an ability to frame things in a way where they bring humor and other things, but there's real insight in what they're pointing to, which is that we've got this sort of, I think, pie-eyed mythical vision of racism being something that's really deep-rooted in America or in South Africa, not realizing that it has its origins way beyond America. Like, as Dwight was pointing to, this is just sort of the colony that was birthed out of a very racist society. And so, the notion that Meghan would have these thoughts of herself, as a function of this, I always tell people racism causes people to live sicker and die younger. That's data. That's not my opinion. The data tell us that. If you look at the data, people with experiences of racism and discrimination, we now even have good biological markers to look under the skin and to see that it causes people to prematurely weather. That's the physical manifestation. But of course, there's a social, emotional, and spiritual manifestation of those things as well. So I think it's a global pandemic that we don't talk about. It's the thing that we won't declare a national or global emergency for. But it's no different than coronavirus. It spreads person to person. It spreads system to system. It's chronic, enduring, and it causes death and disability. I think we need to treat this, and I'm a public health person, this needs to get treated in a public health framework. What if we could declare the same way we declared COVID a pandemic? What if we declared racism a pandemic? What if we use that public health approach to stop and arrest it in its tracks? Look at what we did with COVID. First thing we did, we wanted to detect cases, right? We had to get testing out everywhere. We need to get racism identified. Racist actors as well as racist systems and structures need to be identified. Then we got to stop the spread of transmission. We did that in COVID. People got to mask up. We shut things down. We got to da-da-da. We got to put real disincentives in place for people and for institutions who perpetuate racism. And we've got to stop transmission both from person to person, system to system, but also generation to generation. How do we get things baked into systems, into schools? Because most kids are getting this crap at home or from TV. How do we then overcome that in systems and structures where we can stop the intergenerational transmission? So I think there's a whole lot that's possible here. And I'm really hoping that we take what we've gotten out of COVID and understand if we start to put these things in a different framework, that we actually have real evidence-based solutions and strategies for how to deal with them. And they're not cheap. It's not cheap because there's a real incentive for racism to stay in place. It has real winners and losers, economic benefactors and economic losers. So, but I think we can do it. We're doing it with COVID. We can do it with racism.
Absolutely. Let me go to Carl. Carl, you want to speak on race?
Good morning, Ms. Jackson. Actually, it's Chris.
Hey, Chris. Hi, how are you?
And first of all, no problem, Ms. Jackson. First and foremost, I am one of the at Operation Push in the 70s. How's your father?
Oh, he's doing well. Thank you so much.
Learned about his health by Carl West's Truth Be Told blog. And so I wanted to hear directly from his eldest because you can tell the truth about the Reverend.
Yes.
That being said,
Thank you
That
for
being
asking.
said, your father, a truth teller about race, since he came to this life and walked his path, the reality is you can draw a direct path between your father and what Meghan Markle spoke to Oprah by her interview. With due respect to time, I'll just give bullet points. One, we need to thank Miss Diana Spencer. Strip a title, she, as a mother, taught her two sons the truth. One son is more bolder than the other in relation to whom he married and whom his wife conceived, based on his mother's teeth. So with that being said, when, again, with Oprah, a master in telling the truth, because Miss Winfrey used no notes. She spoke her truth and spoke black woman to black woman about race in the race in our world. And when it came from the black woman who said, I would rather walk with my husband to save my own life so that I do not cause my husband any more trauma because of how his mother left this life. So with that being said, when your father ran for president in 1984, I was a 14-year-old volunteering in Iowa, and I heard a farmer say to a white farmer say to your father, Jesse, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I want to, but I'm not there yet. So it's not by accident that 14 years later, there were many farmers in Iowa who were there yet, but with another black man. So when we tell the truth about race, straight from the heart, strip it bare and make it plain, at the end of the day, you have an interview, black woman to black woman, speaking straight from the heart. Truth cannot be denied. W84, either you've seen the movie or you haven't. Truth cannot be denied. You make it plain and let the dust settle. Ms. Jackson, I appreciate the inclusion in the conversation this morning, and it's nice to know that as well.
Oh, thank you so much. We've been so blessed. God has his hands upon my father and upon our family, and I thank you so much for that. Just was able to kiss him for the first time in more than a month on Sunday, and it's made my whole week. Thank you so much, and thank you for your prayers. Sending you much love. You know what?
All the best.
Thank you. Sending you much love. Thank you. And thank you for walking out in Iowa with him. Before you could even vote. Bless your heart. Rochelle Riley, I got about 30 seconds before I go. Do you think she's biracial now or black? You know what? Hold that. Boom. How about that? What do you think?
Let me just say this. I had to stand up when Dr. Farholden was talking about the racial pandemic, which we have been in since 1619. But people discover that they're black all the time, regardless of what they think they are or where they think they live. People will mistreat you, and you have to prepare yourself for that, which is why we have the talk with our sons and the walk with our girls. So let's just not be so surprised and make sure that we're prepared all the time.
Absolutely. Rochelle Riley, the burden. Come on, everybody. It's a burden, but it's a glorious burden, everybody. African Americans and the enduring impact of slavery. We're talking about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, and race, racism, colorism, classism. Everybody's still talking about this interview. And I'm wondering the impact that it could have on the Commonwealth. Remember, Barbados just left the Commonwealth in September, just a few months ago. And indeed, their prime minister, Mia Mottley, said, it's time for us to get rid of the shackles of colonialism. How do you think this is going to impact all of those people of color? 94% of them. That's the Commonwealth. 94% are people of color. How do you think this will impact them? More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. You guys, you all are a whole lot. Dwight in Disneyland. But but I mean, really, he's not well.
Attorney Fancher's here.
Oh, and speaking of someone who'll light your fire, Attorney Fancher. I guess it's just the Michigan Brigade. Y'all got something going on up in Michigan. This is Attorney Mark Fancher from the National Conference of Black Lawyers. But I think it's important for us to have this conversation because this could have foreign policy, which is no, liberal or progressive, magazine said that this has negatively impacted Black British citizens. They are upset about this. Are you laughing, Mark? Of course you are.
I can't.
Oh,
this is Deborah. And what's so funny about that is whenever we have conversations about racism, people get so uncomfortable. And I was literally at a women's it's like a 1-year training program for women leaders in academic medicine. And we've got this whole week to deal with all of these different issues about being women in academic medicine and how to overcome things, whatever. We got 1.5 hours out of a whole week that's focused on race and racism. 5 minutes into the conversation, somebody brings up their homosexual son, and then the whole conversation became about homophobia. So I let the whole hour and a half go by. I respectfully went up to the leader at the end and said, we have 1.5 hours out of 40 devoted to race and racism. And we just had an hour and a half conversation about homophobia. Respectfully, I request that you replace some other session with a conversation about race. She says, wow, Deborah, I didn't even notice that. I didn't think of it. Mind you, 53 women in the room. I'm only one of 3 African Americans. She comes back into the room and she says, would you be willing to share with the room? I share with them. And I say, it's really bothersome because here we are, another marginalized group, and you guys couldn't even stay in the conversation about race. You immediately took it to something that you were more comfortable with, where you could other us and feel, it hit the me too, right? Me too, because I have a gay son. And then another woman started talking about her son with disabilities, and we just never had the conversation. And they said, well, Deborah, it's uncomfortable. It's just uncomfortable having these conversations about race. I said, imagine living under the weight of racism. You can't even sit in a room in a conversation. But everybody that came before me and everybody that's coming after me, because we can't even have a conversation, we'll be living under the weight of it. So imagine if you felt like this every single day of your life. You were just always on your tiptoes, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's just amazing to me. So of course they wouldn't like it because it's uncomfortable to have the thing that you benefit from, whether or not you want to be the beneficiary. This game has winners and losers. Yeah. People calling that out, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable, but it's like, if you can't be uncomfortable, well, that's on you. Because the weight of living under it is way worse than confronting it in a conversation.
Well, now there's that. Well, I think that's, I think that, I think that's why now it's good to have this conversation. This has opened a door unintentionally. And because I think, quite frankly, I think that the Duchess, I think that Meghan Markle has had her eyes opened. Because like I said, I looked at her social group. And aside from Serena Williams, I said I didn't really see any Black people. And that always is telling. Because she went to Northwestern here. I mean, she was part of a white sorority. And you have the Deltas. I'm one, of course. And the AKAs. You do have Black sororities on that campus. But her,
3 minutes.
I am not faulting her because people have their own orientations. And I can appreciate that. But I do know Paul Newman. I read a People magazine article about him 1,000 years ago. And he was asked by the writer why he embraced his Jewish identity. He said, because for the day, I'm paraphrasing him, on the day that I bump into someone who's an anti-Semite, I've already been girded. Right? Which goes to the talk, right? And helping your children to understand the burden, right, Rochelle? Because
that's right.
Because otherwise, you're sending your children out here disarmed. And that is, as we can see, it could cost you your life. Wow. Because when Queen Elizabeth became the queen, there were like 5 or 6 countries in the Commonwealth. She grew that to about 53 countries. 94% of them are Indian. The largest Commonwealth country is India. India, this economic powerhouse, is in the Commonwealth. And all the wealth is common to her pocketbook.
But what makes a Commonwealth country what makes a Commonwealth country came out of they didn't wait and say we will join the Commonwealth. The countries that's on the back end of a colonial system that's 300 or 400 years old. And so all of these countries were colonial countries. The sun never set on the British Empire. They used to brag about that. And what happened was, as the countries, as the Nigerias and the Jamaicas, as those countries fought for revolutions and for independence, the compromise was, well, we won't be quite colonies, but we'll keep y'all in the colonial system. So we'll still make all the decisions. My face will still be on the money, and you all will still be available when we go to wars over colonial interest. So I don't want us to confuse the Commonwealth if it's the United Nations. That's not the same situation.
And Maria, you said Puerto Rico is a Commonwealth of the United States. Yes, that's right. And I think everyone needs to have a think. But Rochelle, you were about to say something?
I'm so grateful for the part of the conversation, which, quite frankly, we ought to have our own talk, not TED Talks, but call them something else, Dev Talk.
Because facts
but the idea that what we're talking about
This
is
is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. We are having quite the conversation on Meghan Markle, on Harry, on colonialism, on racism, on classism, colorism. There's so many things that this conversation the other night that Prince Harry and the Duchess, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex had with Oprah Winfrey. It brought out a whole lot. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and the voice of Progressive Minnesota, AM 950 radio, sending all of our love and prayers to our brothers and sisters to the north in Minneapolis, St. Paul, as they are about to see if George Floyd is going to get justice. Call me, text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. And GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. We want to know what you're thinking about this interview, because it's about a lot more things were said, but there's a whole lot that's going on underneath the surface. So as we have this wonderful panel that has grown with us, because everybody has something to say. Everybody has something to say because there's a lot to think about here. Let's get to some of these headlines. Chicago, it's going to be a beautiful day. 63 degrees above zero, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 65 degrees above zero, partly cloudy. The Dow closed up 306 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed down 310 points. The S&P 500 closed down 20 points. Are you fully vaccinated? Well, the CDC says you can now have friends and family over for dinner. Fully vaccinated Americans can gather in groups indoors without masks, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. However, those who have had the shot should still wear a face covering in public. Of course, we will have Dr. Deborah Holden back on with us tomorrow morning to talk more about that at greater length so you can continue to stay safe. The jury selection to move forward in the murder trial of Derek Chauvin. Of course, he is the former Minneapolis police officer. He was a police officer at the time who knelt on the neck of George Floyd, killing him, everybody. This 44-year-old who is accused of killing Floyd, 46, by kneeling on his neck for more than 9 minutes, drew an immediate appeal from prosecutors and raised eyebrows among legal observers who said the unusual maneuver, that is, to continue to move forward with the jury trial, even though we're awaiting a third-degree murder trial. People wondering what all of that is about. Will George Floyd get justice? We do hope so. In the meantime, the judge permanently ended the criminal case against Breonna Taylor's boyfriend. In fact, the Kentucky judge signed an order closing the case against Kenneth Walker over his shooting of a police officer during the deadly raid that killed Breonna Taylor. Of course, they were together that night in her apartment, and when they burst down the door, he defended his girlfriend and ended up killing the police officer. They were going to try to send him to jail for a very long time, and now those charges have been dismissed. This American Rescue Plan, the $1.9 trillion plan from the Biden administration, it turns out black farmers are going to benefit a great deal of the $10.4 billion in the American Rescue Plan that will support agriculture. About half will go to disadvantaged farmers, and about a quarter of disadvantaged farmers are black. This will be the greatest relief package that black farmers have had in decades, everybody. Let's get right to it. We have got Rochelle Riley, brilliant author. You got to get her book, The Burden, African Americans and the Enduring Impact of Slavery. You got to get it. You got to get it. She's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And of course, we've got Dwight McKee, Dr. D, one of the founding members of Operation Push and Rainbow Push with the National Action Network. He's been politically organizing for more than 50 years, brilliant sociologist. Dr. Deborah Holden stayed with us, and thank goodness that she did. She said, racism is a pandemic. Got to deal with it, everybody. Spread just like the coronavirus. Brilliant epidemiologist, associate dean of public health at Michigan State University, and of course the teaching pastor from the Salem Baptist Church, the House of Hope, the author of Mirror Moments. What an exciting group we have here today. And joining us, of course, is attorney Mark Fancher from the National Conference of Black Lawyers. You were making a point on the other side before I get to you, Mark. Rochelle Riley. You were making a point about this conversation?
Yes, all I wanted to say was I literally hope, because we have been miseducating all American children for so long, that we get to the point where we can have these types of conversations in a wholesale manner for our kids, so they understand that the Revolutionary War, as the pastor said, was not about, trying to keep people in the Church of England. It was about making sure this Commonwealth was an English Commonwealth and not a free country. Well, not a free country anyway. And that the Civil War was not fought because, people didn't like black people. It was to keep in place this economic system that built this country that we still don't teach our children so they understand why America works, how it became the America that it is, and why it continues to function the way that it is. So I was saying and the racial pandemic, which I wrote about in my column for 20 years, that people still don't understand the brilliance that Dr. Furholden talked about with the impact that has on people. These are things that need to be taught and a part of our lexicon all the time. So I'm just so grateful for that part of the conversation. The only thing I wanted to say was, even as I was watching this, and I was riveted with my bowl of popcorn and my Dr. Pepper, I thought, God, I wish that Meghan would just turn to the camera real quick and say, and Floyd was murdered. I'm amazed people will tune in to hear this backstory of these royals and how they mistreated this woman, which shouldn't surprise us. But we're still not keeping our eye on the bigger balls that we have got to start paying attention to. You mentioned the package that we're really having to watch Congress fight to help people as we get near a second Great Depression, and there's nothing great about it. So I'm just hoping that every time I hear brilliance drop like that I want to take a tape and just every high school. So I just wanted to make sure to thank the panel for those things that are being said. And anybody who missed it, you should have been listening to Santita in the first place, but find it and listen to it.
Well, go to WCPT820.com/Santita. The podcast will be up after the show. You can hear this.
There you go.
That's why we want to have these conversations, because a lot of us have a lot of personal sympathy for Meghan Markle. Who can't have sympathy for someone who has a broken heart and who has dreams that have been deferred and crushed? But what are the dreams? And what should we be moving toward? What was Dr. King fighting for? What is our movement really about? Let me bring on attorney Mark Fancher, because I know he's got something to say about all of this. Attorney Fancher, what say you about Meghan and Harry and all of the conversation about the racism, the classism, the colorism, all of that?
Well, I think that she, as an individual, is representative of a phenomenon which, for many of us in the United States, is a very confusing, um, situation that exists in England. Racism and white supremacy have certainly done a job on the people of the United States, but it's done a job in a different sort of way on the people of England. There is not only the issue of colorism that's present in England. There is this very, from my point of view, weird fascination with this, elitism and royalty and all of that, which compounds it. And if you look at the broader experience of people of color, uh, historically with respect to the United Kingdom, England was a participant in the 1884-1885 Berlin Conference, where heads of state from various countries in Europe sat around a map of Africa, and they carved it up like a birthday cake, and they all took their pieces of it. And the piece that England took became its colonial possession. And it's only because of fierce resistance of African people that there was at least what is called flag independence. People sacrificed their lives, they shed blood in order to become independent. But because of this weird fascination with royalty and with the crown and all of those things, in the aftermath of the withdrawal of the British government from Africa, they did establish this idea of a British Commonwealth, which was essentially a message to African former colonies that, look, we're pulling back and we're giving you independence, but we know that you are in love with the crown. We know that you're in love with this association, with all that the United Kingdom has to offer, and therefore we're establishing a commonwealth, a network of African countries and other countries in the underdeveloped world who are still associated in some way with England. And you should be happy, you should be thankful that you have some connection to this, and in exchange for your being present in our royal presence, you will be subservient on some level. You will comply with our wishes and with our demands. And if you don't, you face the ultimate penalty, which is expulsion from the Commonwealth. Now, that's a bunch of garbage. But the sad thing is that many African people, because of the mentality that had been drummed into them, really thought that that would be a terrible consequence to be, thrown out of the Commonwealth. And so when Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe began to offend the British people in a big way by reclaiming land that had been stolen by British settlers, then he was punished severely, first by the British press, and then by the British government, and then the ultimate, they suspended him from the Commonwealth. And other African countries, many of them went, oh my goodness, how is he? So, he was independent enough, he was clear thinking enough, that didn't matter to him. In fact, he quit the Commonwealth. But that mentality, in other words, it is a form of internalized oppression. In this country, many of us have an inferiority complex, and it's a variation on that theme, and it extends to race as well, because I don't know what the current situation is in England. It's been a while since I've spent any time there. But there is underneath the surface a belief, and I'm serious about this, that the primary objective of young black girls should be to make themselves attractive to white men, so that they might have the great privilege of having a white man them to marry. And so when Meghan Markle comes in and she marries into the royal family, then that's just initially seen as by black people, many black young women in particular, as like the fulfillment of the ultimate fantasy. But on another level, I'm sure that many white people were like, well, okay, we're taking this thing too far. This is the royal family. And yes, it's good for a black woman to find a white man, but not this one.
You've said a whole lot, but I mean, the first public outing that she had, number one, we've never seen someone who was engaged to a member of the royal family put to work. They put her to work immediately. She started making public appearances as a member of the royal family. Her first appearance in England was in Brixton, which is the black side of London. And to your point about to your point about Robert Mugabe, the ultimate insult for him was that when he demanded the land, see, he did what Mandela, God rest his soul, did not do. He said, I want the vote, but I want you to give me my land back. I want that. We're going to have that fight right now as we sign these papers. Give me my land back. That's why he was vilified, but he was a hero all over Africa. The Queen refused to have tea with him ever again. He was okay. To your point, Attorney Fancher, until he wanted the land and the diamonds underneath the land and the oil underneath the land, all the minerals. That was okay until he wanted that.
Yeah, and what's worse is that when they fought the Liberation War to liberate Zimbabwe, when the British saw that the writing was on the wall, that they were going to lose the war, they invited the heads of the liberation armies, including Robert Mugabe, to Lancaster House in England, where they said, what do you want? And they said, we want the land. And they said, well, we'll give you everything, but we won't give you the land. They said, we want the land. So the United States, under Jimmy Carter's administration, said, well, look, we want an end to this thing, so we'll pay for the land. We'll pay the settlers, for their land. And so, the Liberation Army said, well, fine. But Carter lost the election to Reagan, and Reagan would have nothing to do with that deal. And so, Mugabe was very patient. He waited for years before he tried to make a move on the land. But about 10 years later, these soldiers, these guerrilla fighters, these people that, were fighting for liberation of their country, came to Mugabe and said, we really need this land. When are you going to give it to us? And he was left with no alternative but to make some affirmative moves to try and bring about some reform. Up until that point, for those 10 years, he was the darling of the people, in British government. I mean, he was held up as the model for African leadership. They said, this is the man. This is the one that you should follow. And it's like immediately after he started moving on their land that he was turned into the biggest villain on the continent.
Dwight, what do you say to this before we go to the callers?
Well, as always, Mark is right on point. And that's what I was trying to say. Don't you all confuse the Commonwealth with the United Nations. It wasn't a voluntary association with somebody based on mutual self-interest. It was the remnant of colonialism, where Britain was trying to still hold on to the fundamental basis of both the economy and the government. The only difference between the Commonwealth and the colonies, for the most part, is that the Commonwealth, the colonies, you had direct viceroys who were put there by the British Empire, and they made the decisions. They were imposed white people who sat in the government, and the government revolved around them. Mardenberger was a viceroy of India. What happened was when the people started fighting for independence, they then put in, and in many cases, they put in shadow governments who still were in control of England and Germany and those deals that they cut at the Berlin Conference. And so they reported directly to the British, but they were black faces. And they refused to give the land or even negotiate the land, including Mandela, who we love. Part of his deal, they argued back then, is that the Boers cut a deal with him and they would let him out of jail, but they could not ask for the land back. This is about land and resources and who's going to control them and who's going to benefit from them. And they put a standing army on that.
No, I'm just saying you're negotiating with the largest landowner on earth, Queen Elizabeth. She's the only human being who owns whole countries.
Whole countries. Australia, she owns. She owns Canada. She owns whole countries. And at the point that people protest and say, no, this is our country, we live here and not yours, is to the extent as Mark just said, is that they vilify the people. Gaddafi put a let's get all of these petrodollars and all these pounds and control our own oil, and they assassinated him for that reason after they talked to him and put his arms down. I think that we have to really revisit our understanding of colonialism and how these royal families work. The Berlin Conference, again, was a meeting of families, Mark, that sat down and divided the world between themselves. The Habsburgs, the Spencers, the Romanovs. These are royal families who are interrelated and who intermarry. And they divided the world between them. So, the Belgium, Leopold. Leopold is the cousin of the King of England. And he took all of the Congo for himself. We really don't learn history, and we need to understand history so we understand exactly what we're dealing with, so we don't get caught up in the fairy tale.
Chaparral, what's on your mind? Oh yes, I'm sorry, Mark. Yes.
Mark. Yeah, and that's the great tragedy, because you have someone like Meghan Markle, who probably has no clue about any of this, and has no clue about what she's walking into. And, I think she described in her interview how her first assignment, took her on a tour of Commonwealth countries. And, perhaps she did the job too well. Here's a woman who, at least now identifies as Black, who carries herself in a certain way, who speaks in a certain way, who identifies with these dark-skinned people in these countries. And that really is kind of scary to the crown. I mean, if she dares to carry herself in this way and to hold herself up as a model, then what does that do to the psychology of these people who we regard as our subordinates, as people who, we're having a paternalistic relationship with, who are supposed to think of themselves as being inferior to us, and now she comes along? I mean, on some level, even though she's not really a threat, in their minds, she's magnified as something that's very threatening to them. And so the reaction is certainly no surprise to anybody who understands all of this, but may have come as quite a shock to her.
You know what? I'm going to take a couple of calls on the other side of the break. Because this is, Rochelle, I don't think that we get this kind of discussion about really the powers that be, about what we're really looking at. I mean, I don't think we really understand that. I think that we need to. I saw someone on my chat line who said, America's going to have to fight very hard to remain sovereign. There are constitutional issues that we need to look at, because she's about to give birth to someone, to a girl, who at least she will technically be in line for the throne. She certainly will have connections to it. She will have connections to the power that we fought to be decolonized from. There's a lot going on here, but I want to hear from Chaparral and Eddie on the other side of the break, and continue to like and share on this. Nina and Tanya and Hannah and Blue Ray and everybody, and Becky, how you doing? Meddy, and please go to the Santita Jackson Show over on YouTube and like and subscribe over there if we want to go on and get those numbers up. And I can only do that with your help. Go on, Bab. Lead the way, everybody. Boy, oh boy, what a great conversation we're having. Want to encourage you to get the book, The Burden, African Americans and the Enduring Impact of Slavery. I think behind this conversation, Rochelle Riley, dare I give you an assignment? You got another book. on the broader issue of colonialism. I think so. I do. I mean, look, I'm thinking about Lula da Silva down in Brazil. They tried to bury him. He's a champion of black people and the downtrodden, and he's on his way back. Barbados has said, wait a minute, we want to be free. Something's going on in the world. Whole lot. More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. I can depend upon you all to come up with something so profound. Ooh. Mark and Michelle.
One of the people,
yes.
John Nichols is on.
Mentioned earlier that the Queen can do anything she wants. They've already knocked Archie out of line, so this little princess is also going to be knocked out of line, so she will not have access to the throne, and we know why.
But you know what? But look, the monarchy. I'm not feeling that anyway. I hear her about not. Yeah, really about. I hear her about. I just can't fight for that. I got to fight for Barbados to be free. And I got to fight for Jamaica to get into the headspace so that they can be free. And I got to fight for Mugabe to get his land back. And because when you get over to Africa, when you when you take these planes over to Africa, and I've had the experience of going many times with Reverend. First of all, when a black person gets on the plane, you see that the planes are completely white. Number one. And so when you get on the plane, they want to know what you are doing on the plane. Now here, I'm black. They want to know, well, what is your parentage? Because they tell you, well, I know you're not African. Oh, yeah, I am. Yeah, I am. Then when they find out that Reverend Jackson's on the plane, a chill descends over the plane. And it's become like a running joke with all of us who go over there with him. A chill descends upon the plane. Like, what is he doing? And they will ask you, are you with him? Do you know why he's going? Now, mind you, these people will tell you they are Zimbabwean, they're Gambian, they're Congolese. They claim an African identity, but they push back on you when you do the same. Oh, John Nichols, you've walked into the middle of this conversation. But you know what? I'm going to take Yes, John.
Of course. But let me just tell you, nothing has made me happier. I've been happier about nothing so much in the last few days is the fact that I've always been an anti-monarchist.
Thank you.
I don't have any feelings for the monarchy at all. But I do like it. I like the reinforcement of my views by evidence. And there's quite a bit of it of the last 2 days.
I love this man. And I'm going to take a couple of calls and I'm going to come to you. But I would love for you to, because I think.
Do the call. Yeah.
Because I really think everyone, this is John Nichols, the national correspondent for The Nation magazine. And you've got to get his book about the fight for the soul of the Democratic Party. And of course, I've got O'Reilly on here. Her book, she's an author and brilliant. She was a columnist when I met her with the Detroit Free Press, when she'd be calling me about the Queen, Aretha Franklin.
the actual Queen.
Come on
the actual
now.
Queen. That's right.
Right. I mean, an earned queen. Like Michael was the king. Right? When we were on our way to Michael Jackson's funeral, my brother Yusef looked at me. He said, let us be clear. This joker, he's the king. Nobody gave him that crown. He took it and put it on his head. And he earned it.
And he took it from Gary, Indiana. He took it out of Gary, Indiana.
Thank you, right? Joe. Thank you, Joe Jackson. Joe Jackson had a vision. He said, I see something for my children, just like Serena Williams' daddy, Richard Williams, and Venus's daddy. He said, I see something. Tiger Woods' father saw something. And all these black fathers who see something great for their children, they're always vilified. So I mean but I'm hearing you and feeling you on Monarchy because I am like enough already.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey everybody, it's 7:33 Central Standard Time. It's John Nichols' time, but we were going to be talking. Well, of course we're going to be talking about American politics, but he jumped in and said, "Look, I'm not feeling the monarchy either. I'm going to have you speak to that. Would you speak to that before I
I
take
will
these
be
calls?
glad to.
Please. I mean,
Yeah,
why did you feel moved to say that?
Well, I feel moved to say that because, of course, the conversation we're all having right now. Everybody watched the interview. Everybody watched. I think Oprah Winfrey do a startlingly good job of drawing out reality, and I give credit to Meghan Markle for speaking truth in a very difficult situation. But what this reinforces, I think, and should definitely reinforce for Americans, is that the monarchy isn't just the monarchy. It's not just this cute thing over in Britain where you get to go tour castles and stuff like that. It is the underpinning of an elite, classist, often racist form of governance that says that someone is born to rule over others. Now, I know dialed the monarchy down a lot in the United Kingdom, but the fact is that we have to understand that so many of the things that we fight against, right, that the injustices we fight against, are rooted very historic, very distant choices and political moves. And many of them are tied to colonialism, empire, and monarchy. One of the best things this country did was revolt against it. And thankfully, a lot of other places have as well.
Chaparral, what's on your mind?
Good morning, Santita. Good morning, Santita. Thank you so much for taking time. I was out last night as well as also I listened to the Oprah interview. And I was just thinking about Meghan. And I was like, I said to myself, this girl has always fit in with white people. And so she was very comfortable until she became the darkest person in the room. So she had a reality check on her blackness. And she never had to identify as black before. Her circles were all white. So she never had to have that encounter. And I remember some time ago, Oprah had said that she had a black experience too. And so she was in a very wealthy store and they actually followed her. And she was going to purchase something, but she didn't because they didn't recognize that it was Oprah Winfrey, the billionaire. And so she said at the moment she knew she was black. This is what Meghan is experiencing. At this moment, when they're talking to her about what color her son's skin would be, she realized that she's a black woman. And so with all of that, she has to understand that you'll always be black. They're going to make sure that I don't care if that one drop rule, they're going to make sure that that we know you're black. And so she had that, as Stephen says, that mirror moment. And she looked in the mirror and she said, damn, I'm black. This is what happened to her. She's so shocked, so depressed, and all of this. Who they were. We know their history of the monarchy. We know the history of England and the slave trade and all of that. So she just realized, and I'm sorry that she had to be 20-some years old to realize who she was. I wish somebody would have schooled her earlier.
Do you think that if she had maybe another approach to a fuller approach to her blackness, do you think that would have girded her against this assault?
Absolutely. I think that, as a black parent, we have those talks with our children. Even I still talk to my friends who have biracial children, and I tell them, you need to raise your child as black because that's how the world is going to see them. I get a lot of pushback. Oh, I don't want him to deny his other side of his family. I'm not asking you to deny anything. I'm telling you to prepare your child so that child won't be hurt, because the world will see him as a black person, not biracial. They don't have that definition. It's either you're black or you're white. You one of us or one of them. And that's the way the world sees black people. It's something that we have to deal with. So we have to give our children the strongest foundation that we possibly can. Thank you, Santita.
Well, mic drop on that. Let me go to Eddie. Eddie, what's on your mind?
Hi, Santita. Thank you for having me. Yeah, also, one of your panelists was talking about the ownership of land all over the world. I don't know if you remember in modern times when Argentina and England were disputing the island that is in the east side of Argentina.
The Falklands.
And yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So Argentina was claiming Argentina tried to claim the doctrine of Monroe, and guess what? The United States didn't even bother to help. So it's very interesting.
Colonialism at its finest. Yes, Eddie?
Yes, I mean, when I say American for the American, they mean, they thought that everybody from the continent, and that was a proof that it was just a big lie. Well, thank you very much.
No, thank you. This hits people a lot of different ways, John. I mean, so as you know, as you look at this and say, wait a minute, I'm not signing up for monarchy anyway. So what are we doing here?
That's right. Well, we're having this is good. You know, it's a funny thing. I think that something very healthy is happening here in these conversations, because for the last 4 years, right, we had a conversation about almost nothing but Donald Trump, right? And thankfully, we did have some discussion about COVID. We've had some discussion about systemic racism, but it's not that common that the whole country comes together to talk about something and, start to think about, wrestle with something in their head. And I think what happened on Sunday night was, and with its play out, a tremendous number of Americans were confronted with the reality of the British monarchy, right? They were like, whoa. In fact, Oprah Winfrey summed it up pretty well when she said, what? And that reality, kind of filtered through human experience, human beings, a relatively young couple, revealing what they have gone through, what their experience was, has caused a lot of folks to start to think in a deeper way about the romanticization of the Queen and the monarchy and all this stuff. And maybe coming off Eddie's question, to ask, why is it that Americans would have sympathy with monarchs, right? Why would we have sympathy with kings and queens? We sort of, at our best, led the way in saying that's a bad idea. And so I like where we're at. I like the conversations. I like people coming forward and speaking about this and going deeper. I think this is one of those moments where we all get a chance. We all get a chance to think in some new ways. And I think ultimately what I hope is it extends out, right? And we ask ourselves all sorts of questions. Why would we be romantic about inherited power, inherited privilege, right? The divine right of kings, the divine right of queens, when they act in this way, when they do these things, when they have this history. And then maybe we might also ask it here in America. Why do we so frequently, give power and privilege to people who haven't inherited it rather than created it? And why do we have such an imperial presidency? Why do we have such a oligarchy in this country? There's a lot of questions that start to extend from all this, and they do get to serious concerns that we, the people, ought to have about economic, social, and racial injustice, as this interview so well illustrated.
Well, I mean, but that's, I think, which brings us to this, because we're still having this fight. You still had 8 senators who would not, who felt that it was who felt that Americans don't deserve $15 an hour, even though economists say, hey, it really ought to be 24. You still have, we have a president today who's embracing the filibuster. He says, no, I'm status quo. We shouldn't take the filibuster away. While progressives are saying, you got to get, this is archaic, and it's tied to the powerful and not to the masses of people who want to self-govern. Talk to me, John. I mean, because this is bringing that up.
You asked a lot of genius questions.
No.
But that is really a genius connection there. No, I'm serious. That is a very, very vital connection because, and I think we can make it pretty easily. What is the monarchy, right? Or how do we see the monarchy? It's a set of rules. It's a set of structures. It's the way it's always been done. This is tradition. This is, how it's supposed to happen. It's been, ordained that it be this way, right? And those rules have often been cruel, destructive, damaging to people's physically and mentally and psychologically. I mean, there's a lot of damage that comes from sticking to rules that ought to have been abandoned a long time ago. And if we can understand that in the context of monarchy, right, why shouldn't we also be able to understand that in the context of American governance? Why shouldn't we recognize that the filibuster, as it's currently structured, is only a rule? It's not even, the filibuster is not in the Constitution of the United States. It's not in the, founding documents of the United States. The filibuster is not something that is required. It is a structure that was developed by human beings a long time ago. And now, in the 21st century, we have leaders, powerful leaders in this country, elected by the people, who say, well, I'm a traditionalist. I can't change that, or I don't want to change that. I don't want to alter this rule or this structure. Why? Why don't you want to change it? What is it that makes it so special? Has it done good for us? Has the filibuster really helped us as human beings? The filibuster that Strom Thurmond used to try to block the Civil Rights Act of 1957, Dwight Eisenhower and Republicans, as well as good Democrats, seeking to do the first Civil Rights Act since the Civil War. Did it help us in the 1960s when Thurmond and others tried to use the filibuster to block civil rights and voting rights when it actually came to fruition? Has it helped us when we've seen people try to use it to block good legislation that we need for economic, social, and racial injustice? Will it help us? Will it help us when it is used in coming days and weeks to block the For the People Act that would clean up our elections? Will it help us when it is used by Republicans to block the George Floyd Reform and Policing Acts that have come up from the House and that are now going to get stuck in the Senate? Will it help us when it's used to block action on climate change? I mean, no. This is a bad old rule that is used to prevent necessary change and progress. And if we can be upset about monarchs in London, being cruel and using supposed rules and requirements and traditions to treat people horribly, then we ought to be upset about monarchs in Washington using rules and structures and traditions to treat people horribly.
We're talking with John Nichols. The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party is his book. You need to get it. And we're making the connections, Rochelle Riley, who's the author of the book, The Burden, African Americans and the Enduring Impact of Slavery. The National Conference of Black Lawyers, attorney Mark Fancher, Dwight McKee, brilliant sociologist, one of the founders of Operation Push and Rainbow Push. In fact, John, he and Aline Walker were our two youngest founding board members of Operation Push in 1971. And of course, Dr. Deborah Furr
Think about it.
Oh yeah. Dr. Deborah Furr Holden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State. We just kept adding because the conversation is really interesting and important, because I think I see a double-mindedness, John, and I'd like to open this to other people on the panel. I see a double, but I want to start with you. A double-mindedness because we still do worship monarchy. We do. I mean,
well, yeah.
But I think I also see it bleed into our politics.
Of course it does. And we treat our elected leaders with a reverence too frequently, when we ought to treat them with a skepticism. And This doesn't mean that we should be rude to them. It doesn't mean that we should be cruel. But it does mean that we should ask fundamental questions. You know, we had an interesting thing happen just the other day, and it didn't, frankly, get a lot of news. But we had Joe Biden, the president of the United States, who I think, frankly, is doing a good job on a lot of stuff. But he ordered a bombing mission, or he permitted a bombing mission in the Middle East without going to Congress, without authorization from the House and the Senate. And Ro Khanna, who's been on your show quite a few times, said immediately, we've got to speak up about this, because just as we didn't want Republican presidents to use their power to do bombing missions without permission from Congress, we should not want Democratic presidents to do it as well. And this goes to the heart of a very big concern. We cede too much power to our chief executive, to our president. We ought to check and balance our president always, and make sure that president operates, you know, from a standpoint of following the basic premises of separated powers. And that is a big concern in the United States, because at the founding of the American experiment, one of the best things the founders, who were very flawed men, one of the best things they did was they said, we don't want an American president to operate without checks and balances, without controls, because that's what we revolted against when we threw off the British monarchy. And so we should always be on our guard in this regard, in this area. We should always be concerned, because we should never want an imperial presidency.
You think that's what we have now?
I think we do, and I think it's not the fault of, again, I'm not here picking on Joe Biden. He inherited an imperial presidency, and let me give Biden credit, because after some of the pushback on that bombing, he said the other day that he is interested in going to Congress and working out some sort of new arrangement as regards authorizations of the use of military force. I still think there's a lot of problematic stuff. We don't need to devote the show to all this. But I think that I give Biden credit for recognizing that this is a problem. But at the end of the day, it falls to the members of the House and the Senate, and frankly to the people, to make sure that our presidency is de-imperialized, that it is drawn back toward more of a constitutional governance, as opposed to one where we put too much authority, too much power in any individual.
Mark Fancher, very quickly, and you, Dwight McKee, and you, Rochelle, do you think that we embrace, do you think we're still embracing of imperialism, and imperial powers, and Mark?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the United States is the very definition of an empire, an imperialist practice. And you know, I know what the language says in the Constitution, and I know what the purported ideals are of the country, but it's all a lie. I mean, this country was established as you know, basically a replica of you know, of the monarchy in England. It was set up by design to be controlled and dominated by a small elite. At the time that the Constitution was ratified, only a small group of wealthy white men were even able to vote. And so it has never been an economic democracy. It's never been a political democracy. I mean, even in today's times, you know, if someone wants to participate in the political process, they've got to have a lot of money. They've got to be blessed by this small little group of elites, and it's not anymore just individual families. Now it's multinational corporations that form the monarchy for the United States empire. You know, and the reality plays out for people who don't follow the script. You know, if a Bernie Sanders can outpoll Joe Biden, but still Bernie Sanders is regarded as some sort of crazy old lunatic, you know, if the squad represents a significant you know, political strain of thought in the United States, but yet they're marginalized and condemned and marginalized and ostracized, then we see the reality. So this is in very many ways no better than the British you know, model, and in some ways it's worse. And that's why they get along so well, because all of them are part of a global empire. They're all, you know, dedicated and committed to capitalist domination of an empire and the control and domination of the planet for the purposes of enriching major corporations in the West. So, I don't see the United States as being any better, none whatsoever.
Rochelle, is this part of the enduring impact of slavery, which was a colonial enterprise? Or do you see it in our politics today?
I feel a little like Dr. Verholden at the conference where the conversation switched from race to homosexuality. I want to talk specifically about race, because imagine what it's like for Black people in a system that literally was designed by slaveholders and that we have never thrown out and said we are better than this, but have amended over and over and over again. We have been breaking the law. America has been breaking its law its entire existence. Everything that we put into place, 14th Amendment, 13th Amendment, all of that was designed because we kept breaking the law, so we fixed the Constitution. What we needed to do was to throw out that Constitution and to deal with what that first dream was, and that's a country where all men were created equal. It's never been a country where all men were created equal. The imperialism exists because it is literally our identity, and I don't know that that's ever going to be able to be changed because it's so ingrained in the founding of this country. So I'm not sure what the path to right is, but I know that we're not going to get on it until we actually talk about that and the fact that that is what exists. I think Mark explained it brilliantly. That's where we started. That's where we still are. And until we address that, that's where we're going to be.
It's not going to be right until we get it right. Dwight McKee,
That's
before I
right.
get closing thoughts. Before I get closing thoughts from you, John. Dwight McKee?
We see royalty as a family. Royalty is a system. It is a group of people who, the king and the queen, their family was the conquering family who got the land, but then they rewarded the people who fought with them by giving them nobility and land. And so kings have kingdoms, and princes have principalities, and counts have counties. These are systems of people who've been rewarded over the years of land all over the world that they then use the military and politics to protect. And so if we still keep saying this as a family, as a dysfunctional family, we'll never understand what this is about. This is about a system. Tarzan was part of the royal family. He ended up crashing in Africa because they owned property, they owned the diamond mines in Africa, and his family was going over to examine those lands that they owned in Africa. The plane crashed and he got stuck there, but he was part of the royal family. We need to understand what we're looking at. That's always my mantra. Understand what you're looking at.
John, the final 2 minutes belong to you. I don't know where these conversations go, John. but
We're going exactly the right place. This is where we began, or this is where what I was saying at the beginning. This is healthy for us to dig deeper in, and what brilliant comments from all of our folks here. This is what we ought to do, because it is in this sort of deconstruction of the monarchy and of imperialism and of colonialism and of this concentration of power that we start to say, hey, hold it. Why is it that way? And why won't we change it? And, we have seen it, we're talking about this interview on television, and understandably so. But look, we saw it last week. We passed the American Rescue Act, right? This is a good thing. There's a heck of a lot of good stuff in there, much to celebrate. And yet, what did they pluck out? The $15 minimum wage. Now, we're not going to do that, right? Even though people have been stuck working 40 hours a week for poverty wages since 2009, we're not going to change that. What did they do? Oh, they cut down the $2,000 payments. Now it's only $1,400, and it doesn't go to everybody it went to in the previous deals. Oh, we cut back on unemployment. We're not going to give quite as much for unemployment. And that, what got cut out? What got cut out? It's that which helps everyone, that which is the most necessary for those who work the hardest and get the least. And it is systemic. It does reflect a system that doesn't begin with the people, but begins with the elites and then shares a little So we criticize our Republican friends for talking about trickle-down economics, and we say, well, that's a immoral and wrong-headed thing. But we got trickle-down governance, right? We have governance in this country that is still framed around an elite, that tells us what we can have rather than responding to what we need. And that is very monarchical. That is very imperial. And that is something that ought to change.
John Nichols from The Nation magazine, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party. That is his book. Rochelle Riley, her book, The Burden, African Americans and the Enduring Impact of Slavery. Stay right here on Facebook Live. Going to answer a few more questions, get to you, AJ and D. I'm Santita Jackson. What a joy, what an honor, what a privilege it is to be with you every day. Love you much. See you in the morning. Stay right there, though. Wow, you guys. I want, I had the list of the senators, John, so you could go through each one of them. I need you back here before the week is out because I think we need to know who these people are. But if you all don't mind, I want to bring on some of the callers.
Yeah, both of them are still here, AJ and D.
Okay, let me bring up AJ. AJ?
Yes.
Hey, AJ, what's on your mind?
I just wanted the people to realize that United States is a British colony. If you take a look at, people should look up Bar Association, what that means. British Accreditation Registry. We look at the first several presidents that we've had in this country were not American citizens. The system that we're living under is just an extension of the British monarchy. And like I heard someone saying that the corporations are running things now. But if you look at it, the people need to understand that once they take the power, the people are giving the power to the politicians. The people are allowing themselves to be manipulated and hoodwinked. And that's all this whole thing with racism is. It's a means to keep the people separated. And if people ever get wise to what's going on, they will be in a position to take the power. It's just like this movie called V for Vendetta. It's similar to that, where someone decides to go against and take power for themselves. We have been brainwashed to thinking, even about white supremacy. There's no such thing as a white supremacy. There's white savagery, there's white barbarism, but supremacy, how are you supreme? By destroying other people's lives. If you were so supreme, you could leave people the way they are and rise above it on your own. You don't have to suppress people. So it's a brainwash tool, and it's used to, just like all the other wedge issues out here, used to keep the people separated so they don't realize their power.
Thank you so much for that. Brilliant insights. D, what's on your mind today? D? D? Okay, do we have D there? If not, I'm going to get closing thoughts from my guests. Let me start with you, Rochelle, because you said, we got to, you sound like my father there. He said, you're not going to get around race and racism in America and in this world order. I brought up the fact that Lula da Silva down in Brazil, who's been a champion of Black people, and he's been championed by the Black Brazilians. I mean, in fact, that's the blackest country outside of Africa, everybody. And they jailed him, they imprisoned him so that he would not run and continue with the reforms that he instituted. But now, praise be to God, they've ruled that he's going to run again. And if people get out and vote, he will beat Bolsonaro. And that will be a huge victory, not just for Brazil, not just for this hemisphere, but for the world. Why do you think this conversation, as we make the connection between race, racism, classism, imperial politics in England and here, why is all that important? And why is race at the center of it?
Everything about how we live is determined by our identity as a republic, as a place for people to pursue life, liberty, and happiness depending on the color of your skin. African Americans in this country have spent a century and a half seeking permission to be here, permission to vote, permission to sit at public lunch counters, permission to ride buses and sit where you want, permission to have equal educations for our children, permission. And we have got to stop seeking permission and deal with the fact that this republic, just like the American republic, has never, ever been what it is supposed to be. And we have lived with the myth of that dream since 1619, and we have to change that. If we do that, then at some point we will understand that the dream may be possible, but it's not possible as long as we continue to be just a little England with different rules. As the pastor said, it's just all about the rules. Rules never apply to Black people the same way they apply to everyone else. So we need to stop seeking permission, start to literally follow the Constitution that was written, even though it wasn't written for us, and stop amending it and just throw it out and write the right one.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. And let me go to you, Attorney Fancher.
Yeah, I underscore what Rochelle Riley just said. And I think that, a big problem, a big obstacle, particularly for oppressed people and Black people in particular, is mental slavery. I mean, the fact that we do just think that the most that we can do is just continue to ask for permission and continue to beg for crumbs from the table as opposed to dreaming bigger, for having a better vision. But the last thing I wanted to say is this, that while it seems difficult sometimes to make a difference, I think that what the Meghan Markle episode demonstrates for us is the power of knowledge and information and clear thinking. Just in that little interview where she, with her limited knowledge and perspective, was able to provoke a lot of thought and discussion and a clearer analysis by many people about what actually all of this means. Imagine if she had been even better informed, if she had been clear thinking from the beginning, and when given this platform, she had been able to talk about a lot of the things that we've talked about this morning, how much more of an impact that would have made. So I think it really falls to all of us to just continue to gain as much knowledge as we can, to become as best informed as we can be, to be tied into the power of God and the knowledge that He is with us, and to be emboldened by it, to say and do the things that are necessary in order to bring about the type of a world that I think all of us really want.
I understand.
I can hear something in the background. And if you could mute that, Dylan. Let me go to you, Dwight. Your closing thoughts?
I can't understand New York.
Okay.
You there?
Now, I can hear. Are you out and are you in a car, Dwight?
No, that's you all. That's somebody else.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Dwight?
Yes. Yeah, you can't understand New York, and yes, you understand Old York. Prince Charles is the Duke of York. You can't understand New Jersey, yes, you understand Old Jersey. Old Jersey is in England. Birmingham is not just in Alabama. Birmingham is a city in England. They pack the cotton in Birmingham, but they send the cotton to England where it was processed and then sold to all of the European countries and all those countries that was part of the British Empire. You can't really understand this country out of context with the royal families. Pennsylvania was owned by William Penn, the whole state was. And then he divided some of it among his friends and the Quakers. That's his face on the box. Quaker oats, they grew oats in Pennsylvania and put his face on the box. And so you cannot understand the economy or the politics of this country without understanding this colonial basis and who was involved in the transatlantic slave trade. They just didn't trade slaves. They traded rums and goods, and it went from Africa to the slaves in the Americas to manufacturing the cotton and the growing the crops and sending those back to England to be processed and manufactured. And people own those trading companies. That is how the whole economy is structured. And so racism only plays a role in it, in that it gave them the option to distinguish the lower workers and for them not to be able to run away.
Your thoughts, John Nichols? Whew.
I love this conversation.
Well, of course, as someone who is
good
an
conversation.
anti-monarchist, of course you are loving this conversation. Because I don't think we have it enough in the United States. I really don't. I think that we should.
So we got to be reminded of it, right?
Yeah.
And what we have to be reminded of is that this is a multiracial, multi-ethnic country where the work is done by people who are not paid a fair wage for what they do, where they are not given, in many places, the right to organize and the right to collectively bargain, where there's so many basic protections are not available to people. This is a country defined by economic and social and racial injustice. We know that. We've known it for a long time. It's not some new revelation. But what is healthy about this moment is that we're having conversations about it, and the conversations are going deeper, and they are being taken up by a rising generation of young people who have centered the struggle against inequality, the struggle against injustice, the struggle against racism in their activism. And they demand, not in the old, kind of simplistic one issue way, but now speak in an intersectional manner to all of the challenges that must be addressed. And so I see the conversation we're having right now as a very healthy one, a very necessary one, but also one that's part of a change. And we have to ask ourselves, where does the change come, right? Victor Jara, the great South American folk singer, sang in the early 1970s, "Take hold of your destiny, the future begins today." And that's how we ought to be approaching what's going on. We ought not be satisfied by people who say, this is how it's always been done. This is the traditional way to do it. This is what the rules tell us we have to do. We ought to recognize that there come points in our history where we have to take hold of our destiny. We have to say the future begins today. That's what we celebrate, right? We say, oh, wow, July 4th, 1776, that was a big deal. 1787 with the Constitution, that was a big deal. The aftermath of the Civil War, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, that was a big deal. We go again and again, we see all these dates and we say, well, people actually took hold of things and made a change. Well, we live in a moment where we need to take hold of things and make a change. And that means we have to be very strict with those who we have elected to positions of power. And that is not just talking about Republicans. That is talking about Democrats as well. And saying, we can't let you wait another 2 years, another 4 years, another 8 years, another 20 years, another 50 years, another 100 years. We can't let you have power and use it simply to maintain a status quo. You must use power to make change, or we have to have someone else in those positions of power.
You all, what a conversation. And I feel so blessed to have the privilege to count all of you among my friends, and I have so much admiration and respect for all of you. You bring so much brilliance. I wish Dr. Deborah Holden were still here, because boy, talking about this racism and the pandemic that it is. And racism is really at the core of so much of this. My brother, Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr.'s book is going to be reissued, the 20th anniversary edition, A More Perfect Union, Advancing New American Rights. Before we buried our grandmother at Arlington about 4 years ago, come this summer, he was giving us the history of Arlington, and he was giving us the history of America. He always does that because that's so important. And he said, everything in this country is wrapped around slavery. Everything is wrapped around race, which is really, it's privilege. It's power. That's what it is. And we've racialized it, but we've done it until we deal with it. We're not going to get off the dime. You know what they said? You remember this, Miss Seeley in The Color Purple, uh, Rochelle, until you do right by me, all you touch is going to crumble. You got to do right by the indigenous people. You've got to. You don't have a choice. You got to do right by the enslaved Africans. You don't have a choice. All the women who've been denied, you don't have a choice. The spirit world doesn't believe in social promotion. You don't move forward in God's eyes until you learn these lessons back here. But we're going to have a just society and a peaceful world if we're going to be blessed. That's just my thoughts. So everybody, I want to thank you today. Who would have thought that this little interview with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry would arouse so much emotion and so much thought? But John, I think it is making us talk about monarchy because we're going to have a constitutional issue, John, because we have their children are in between countries, and you're looking at people who could get involved in our politics and they'd have a direct connection to the crown. That is something I think we need to talk about, John.
We have plenty to talk about, and yes, and let us also be mindful that sometimes we have a little bit of an unhealthy circumstance in this United States where we have the sons and maybe even sometime in the future the daughters of former presidents, often disgraced former presidents, running for president.
Ooh.
Right? We ought to break out of monarchical thinking, not just as regards the British Empire, but also perhaps as regards the United States.
Well, now you've just said a whole lot. You've said a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it comes down to. And believe me, look, what I just remember meeting President Mugabe, and Mark can appreciate this. He was devastated that the Queen. It was when he demanded that she give him his land back. That's when she shut down on him and she refused to have a private audience with him and have tea ever again. Ouch. I mean, Robert Mugabe was a teacher, an upright teacher in a British system, and who became the freedom fighter. But you know what? We've got to think about these things, everybody, because a lot of people, Rochelle, I was telling them, I said, I remember the day that Meghan Markle got married, and I saw more women, black women in particular, walking around with fascinators on. I said, my mother and I looked at it. We said, you got to be kidding. But my mother's a stone cold, a movement person. So she was like, Dr. King wasn't fighting for this. Like, what?
We sometimes lose our way, but we'll get back on track.
Well, some of us, didn't want to end slavery as much as we wanted to get out the fields. Let me in the big house. That's an issue too. I think we got to look at all of that, right? So, Rochelle, I got to have you back. You have a home here. Anytime you want to be a part, just if there's an issue that comes up, you can always call.
I'm happy for that. I appreciate it. I'm honored always to do it. And anybody who needs to know more about me can go to RochelleRiley.com to talk about the book or the new book. And thank you for these conversations. They are necessary. Necessary.
You got to come back because there's a lot to unpack. I mean, we're living in a time where we're unpacking a lot, if not everything.
I'll be there every time because Black folks got big suitcases. So yes, I will be there.
Trunks. How about that? And storage lockers. There's a lot. Oh, yes. Yeah. There's a lot. We've endured a lot. And so there's a lot that we've got to undo. So
well, what a panel this I was honored to be on them. I've got to peel off now for a meeting as well. But thank you so much for this conversation.
Well,
and for the folks who.
Thank you. You're a jewel. Mark Fancher. God bless you, Dwight McKee.
Well,
you're too
thank you
much.
as always. I'm going to have to sign off too, but I'm glad to hear that you all are willing to help unpack because people say I have a lot of baggage.
No, you know what? You are a blessing, really. And you give us the truth, and I think that is so important to have this conversation. Because I think a lot of the conversation has been misdirected. We were like, oh my goodness, they're looking at the color of the child. I'm like, we do that too today. Come on, you guys. Colorism is still with us. So don't act like, please, don't do that. And there's some other issues we got to deal with too. And John Nichols, always, I got to have you back before the week is out because I want us to unpack these Trumpites, these Trumpers, if you will, who are not Trump. Like Paulie, this governor. Oh my gosh! I mean,
oh yeah,
this is the next This is the next wave, and they are, they're people that we need to watch. They're people that
you are
bear
correct.
watching. They bear watching. You made when I was reading your article, you made me look at Paulie and just some other Hawley and some other people. I said, wait a minute. He has given birth to a whole generation of young people, and they are younger, they are meaner, and they are full of passion. And this is
Well, but you are right. And look, the Republican Party has tragically become more and more inclined toward, the strong man or the strong woman, the authoritarian style figure, the dominant person. Again, rather monarchical model. And we should talk about that more. Preview today, and I have to run as well. I will remind you that in the modern era, the president who was most deferent to and most excited about the monarchy was Donald Trump. Remember when he went to London, when he went to England, and was just seemed to be thrilled to be at all these royal dinners where he was, by the way, welcomed by the Queen. And so we should not lose sight of those connections. That those who seek to govern in a monarchical way here in the United States, right, have often take their cues from what we see in England. And I guess I'll leave off by saying that it's important to remember that in the United Kingdom there are anti-monarchists. There are people who want to do away with royalty, and I'm on their side.
I am too.
I'm on the side of the anti-monarchists around the world.
Me too.
And I'm so honored to be a part of this conversation today.
Well, you're part of the show.
It's a real pleasure.
You have your own hashtag on Tuesdays. But also remember, Donald Trump wanted us to become honorary members of the Commonwealth. Remember that? He dropped that little pearl.
My jaw dropped. Yeah.
And I said, is anyone going to talk about this? People didn't even. It's just like nobody talked about it.
I think maybe we'll talk about it now. Maybe this is another gift we've gotten from this interview as an opportunity to remind people of what a bad idea that was.
Oh my gosh, how destructive! It would kill the American project. It really would. It would. But I love you all. I love you, John. I love you, Dwight. I love you, Mark. I love you, Rochelle. I love you, love you, love you. I love you, Morning Stars. I love everybody. I just feel so privileged. It's such a blessing. It's a privilege indeed to be with you every day. Thank you. Thank you. And Josette, you said, keep talking about it. We're going to keep on talking about it. That's right. Have some real conversations. And thank you for being so sweet about my mom. She is a real gem. I love you, everybody. God bless you. See you tomorrow morning, God willing, on the Santita Jackson Show. Thank you, Dylan. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.